some people sort of have this attitude of just like, I don't like people. But I think she's like, I think people say that because they haven't given themselves a chance to like be open to the human experience and how lovely it can be, or they're just not showing up in the right way, like they haven't been taught. And so I think if you can just sort of learn the basics of how to be conversational, what that looks like, the give, get behind it, putting yourself being present in it, not being worried about like, what am I going to say next, but just like actually just being involved in the conversation like that. And this is something that's been a journey of like learning for me. But like when I am in a conversation with somebody and it's like we're real and it's we're talking, like there's so much goodness that comes from it. It's probably like a primal survival, like innate need within us as like how we've evolved as humans is the community, is the connection piece. And it's so rewarding.
All right, gang. Hello, hello, hello. This is another episode of the Sell by Being Human podcast. I'm your host, Alex Smith. And this is the podcast where we can learn from people in all walks of life who sell things through the lens of human connection. I think we can learn human skills from people all around us, and this is the podcast where I'll bring the very best of those people together. And we have one of those people today on the podcast. She's someone I met, and just the story of how we're connected is pretty crazy. So keep listening to the podcast to know, the wild coincidences that can happen when you put yourself out there in selling. But this is someone who is a former kayak director and guide turned global account director and speaker with me on stage at this past year's Sales Success Summit in Austin, Texas. And just someone that's a dear friend and connected in the best of ways. Please welcome none other than Samantha Price to the podcast. Welcome, Samantha.
Oh my God, that was the best intro ever. I love it.
Fitting for one of the best guests. I've been looking forward to this, and we've had to reschedule a few times, but looking forward to this all day. And this is like when you hear somebody that you vibe with, it is saying a lot of things. Like I first heard Sam, for all of those listening, I'll put a link to her podcast. We were just talking about how she was first on one podcast, and that podcast was listened to by one of our former guests, Jack Wilson, and that person reached out to her and got her connected to someone else, Scott Ingram, who I've been on, and that through that Sam got invited to be on stage, and I was on stage with her, and we got connected through that. And I was just listening to Sam while I was running one day, and I was just nodding my head about her talking about anything from just being obsessed. It was like she was so obsessed over just being great, not just the craft of selling. We'll talk about like the difference of like your obsession over your craft, and she was talking about things like just trying to impact people and try to leave people better off, and human connection throughout her sales process. And I'm like, yes, this is the person. And also how a former kayak director, for all of you, like not only will you probably be on an awesome experience, but maybe that guide is probably, I know, in sales, but could also be great if they chose to be a professional seller.
Yep.
And that's what Sam decided to do. So Sam, we'll talk about your story in a little bit. But I want to start by just asking a question to you that I think you'll go some great places with. And I ask everybody this simple question when you think about selling, and it's this. When you hear the term, Sam, sell something, but sell it by being human, what does that mean for you? And what does that make you think about?
Yeah. So the word that's screaming in my head is authenticity. And I think that was the pivotal moment for me as a seller, was when I learned that when you are your authentic self in a sales cycle with a buyer, with a buying group, and you can bring that authenticity to the table, like that's actually what makes you extremely successful. And you don't go into it necessarily authentic so that you can be successful, but it's what makes the job so wonderful is that you get to show up as your authentic self. Buyers really appreciate that. They love that. And it's more so just about like, we often hear, people buy from people they trust or people they like. And that what that just boils down to is just showing up authentically. It's like, hey, when I'm presenting to you what we offer, I'm not reading from a script. Like I'm speaking from a place that is from my heart, that I'm giving you previous customer stories that I've been a part of and had made impact for this buyer. And once I just really leaned into the authenticity piece, I'd say like that's when selling became game changing for me. And sometimes we're not going to vibe with everybody on the call, and that's okay. Am I going to prioritize those accounts? Probably not. And it's fine, right? Like maybe just a buyer is looking for a different type of experience that I might not be able to handle, and that's perfectly okay. But I think just from my lived experience of being in sales, more times than not, just as long as you're bringing authenticity to the table, there's usually some connection point with everybody. And it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So, and we've had this similar answer from some guests. So I always like to ask people a follow up. So some people think it means like, showing your true heart to someone, being vulnerable with people.
Yeah.
Like for you, like, is there an example? Are there little micro things that you do to really show someone that, okay, they're talking to the real version of Sam, not the sales version of Sam?
Yeah. And it's kind of easy for me right now because my life is chaos. I have twin 5-year-olds and a 1-year-old. My wife, Rachel, and I were raising very young kids. And with raising young children, I mean, I would imagine at any age, but in particular right now, and this is wisdom that's been shared to me from other parents who've lived the young kid age, it's like very intense emotions, like somebody's always getting sick, something's happening, like it's a lot. And in a good way, like we love it, but there's a lot, there's also like there's just so many things that happen. And so I'll just think about, like a call that I was on the other day. And the whole family had just gotten over from having the stomach bug. And so when you're kind of in that, like in the beginning time of a call and you're waiting for everybody to join, you're giving it a few minutes. It's like, hey, let me tell you about this stomach bug that I just had with my family. And it just warms it up. It warms up the conversation. It helps take away the stiffness.
Yeah.
And it just kind of, there's a little bit of like laughter and humor in the room. And I don't know. So that's where I try to bring in that authenticity piece and just warm it up so it doesn't feel so like stiff and, kind of uncomfortable, if you will. Yeah. Like breaking the ice. Let me just tell you about how I was throwing up yesterday for 24 hours.
When you say that, I do similar things. Like I'm like, what, like, how are you doing? I always think about like telling just a quick story. Like, how are you doing for me is like, I'm actually doing great. Like I actually, like this past weekend, I saw Jerry Seinfeld in Tampa. It was really amazing to see somebody like that. He told this joke. It was hilarious. No way. I watched Sein. And then they start telling stories and or they're like, oh my gosh, Sam, we just got over the stomach bug and this and that. And they start telling you stories. It's so good. You've succeeded when, like, I had someone, we've been working together, multiple calls. We're at the end of a buying cycle, but they, I call them on their cell phone and they're like, oh, Alex, like I'm at the vet. I'm taking my dog in to get, worked on. They would never say that, or they just wouldn't pick up. But like, they know that like, I'm not calling if I don't need something. And they were willing to tell me something that's happening in their life. That's when, when someone else is willing to like tell you something specific or give you the name of their kids or something like that, then you're like, oh, okay, then they're comfortable being their, authentic self to me. Exactly. And then that's that where the magic is, right?
That's where the magic is. And it was interesting when I, got Scott invited me to be on his podcast. and I started listening to, older episodes. And one of the things that I pulled out from that was like, oh, I want people to like go deeper. Like, I want to learn more. Like, I don't want to hear surface level. Like, if you were sick, like, I want to hear that you got the stomach bug. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
if you went to the vet, like, what happened? Like, what's going on with your dog? Like, I don't
Hmm.
know.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just me because I'm such
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
innately curious person. But so that's what I just try to bring to the table is this is like what I want out of people is to like, hey, like tell me more about your vet visit. Like what's going on? Is your dog okay?
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know, just
Some
like
people are
little
like, oh, that's irrelevant to why I called, so they might not say. But just that one, like, oh, is everything okay? I didn't mean to interrupt, like when you're doing
yeah,
something, but like, what's your dog's name? And I hope they're okay. They may
yeah,
be, yeah, it's aware, yeah, it's something worse, and like, but they'll tell you, and
yeah,
you can kind of gauge. But I always like to ask, like you said, that yeah, that follow, yeah, like, oh, like that's don't worry about my dog. Oh, what's your dog's name? What kind of dog do
yeah.
you have? Like that sort of thing.
Because sometimes
Um,
it can be weighing heavy on you, and
yeah,
you're
yeah,
looking for that like way to
yeah,
just unload a little bit. Other
yeah,
times not, which is fine. But
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Well, Sam, I know people are like, okay, kayak directors, not in sales. I know before that you were
yeah,
kind of you went to school for journalism.
yeah.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about like, kind of where you thought there was some correlation in what you were doing to maybe a career doing this. Because I think a lot of people are walking around there listening
Mhm.
to this that maybe
Yeah.
not in a professional sales role, but they're like, you know what, maybe I am doing something that, could be considered as sales. So, yeah, help me understand maybe, kind of like about some of those roles and maybe, looking back on it, were any
Mhm.
of those roles, kind of similar in skill level and not obviously kind of, in what you're doing, but what was kind of similar about maybe some of those past experiences that have informed, what you do now?
Yeah, I really wasn't an academia kid throughout middle school and high school. I liked math, but I was one of those kids that really just cared about sports and making friends. And it was hard for me to really pay attention in class. So like through that process, I mean, like I think since elementary school, I was prescribed, the like Adderall. I stopped taking that after college, so I'm not doing it anymore, and I think that that's part of the story that I'll get to. But it was always just really hard for me to kind of be interested in school, and so then when I went to college, and you got to kind of be more thoughtful about where you wanted to lean in for your studies, this whole idea behind journalism was really interesting to me. So I was really captivated by like the interviewing process and being able to sort of like pull out really interesting information from that person that I was talking to. Just the whole idea of like being on the football field at Florida State University through my journalism degree. And I got to interview with Bobby Bowden and the football players. Like there was just like so much life and energy to being able to be on the football field. But then once I started, working for a news station after I graduated from college, it was at the time where everything was switching from like local news station on TV to like we're all going to get media dumped on our cell phones and like people aren't going to watch the local news anymore. And so I was really a part of that shift. And I thought long and hard about like, do I want this to be the rest of my life? And the answer was no. But I had a really good friend who was in sales at the time. And what she said to me that was really compelling is that sales is really about making relationships with people and like helping people out and just like that human bond that you get. And I'm like, totally, like, I can get on board with that. That feels like me and my authentic space. And so I got into sales with that, always relationship driven. However, I wasn't passionate about what I was doing. Like it felt like a drag, you know, selling stuff that didn't hit the mark for me. And that's when I quit and started leading kayak tours in San Diego, California, because I just had this like innate knowing that if I'm going to be doing something for the rest of my life, like it has to be meaningful to me and I have to be passionate about it. Didn't have kids at the time, wasn't married, so just took the opportunity to figure it out while taking people on really incredible experiences through the ocean in San Diego, California. I mean, like the experience of having a gray whale that's migrating from Alaska down to Mexico, make a pit stop in San Diego and, watch them like breaching out of the water, get to jump in, swim, snorkel alongside them while you're seeing like a mother with her calf. Like it just was like, it would bring tears to my eyes. And that's where I came to this knowing of whatever it is that I'm selling, like I want to have some sort of contribution to the environment and conservation. And so that's where I was able to mold my sales experience into, they call it sustainability or ESG, like that's the business term for it, and was able to find a way to combine those skill sets to sell something that I'm passionate about. And it's pretty wild that it happened. I mean, like Alex, like before we hopped on the phone, it's sort of like you take chances in life and you have no idea where that's going to lead you. And so at the time when I did quit my job to lead kayak tours, it was sort of like, this could be a total bust. like there was so much fear going into it, but it was sort of just like trusting that intuition, that instinct that this is going to put me on the path that I need to be at, or that's just going to be life-giving, life-fulfilling.
Yeah, I as I hear that, like the words that you were saying, like, I want to make a contribution, I want it to be meaningful. And, a
Yeah.
lot of people wouldn't necessarily sometimes like equate that to sales and stuff like that. But,
Mm-hmm.
I bet like something says to me, like when you're leading guides, like you were doing things to give people like a really great
Yeah.
experience. Cause when you're saying that, like, hey,
Yep.
you can like visualize it. So even this many years later, you can, that I could see that passion in you kind of explain it.
Yep.
Like how, like for people that maybe kind of, I don't know, struggle because we always hear, term like find what
Mm-hmm.
you're passionate about, but they can't
Yeah.
really kind of find that. And,
Yeah.
sometimes people might say with that advice that you might be searching forever.
Yep.
How did you kind of, I don't know if it was like, no, but how did you
Mm.
kind of like, relay that to the people that you were, kayak, going on the kayak experience? Because they probably had no clue what they were in for, like that level of, potential experience that they
Yeah.
were doing.
I think like one thing, and I don't know if this is just instinctually, but like I have this way where I just notice that things seem like kind of dull. Like somebody is paying for this experience on a kayak. And I would watch other guides, and I just remember feeling like fascinated by the ones that brought their own creative touch to it. And like the ones that I would see that just going back to like reading from a script. They're like, reading from like let's like the fake script of being a kayak guide. But like you could just tell
Hmm.
that they're speaking words, but like their head, their being is not there. And like when you present in that way, like your audience checks out. And so I kind of went into it, the experience of guiding people as like, if it were me, like what would make this interesting and compelling? Like what would make this experience interesting? And so to your question on like what it being like doing like kayak guiding relate to sales, it was like it goes back to the authenticity piece about that was what I could bring to the table when I was taking people on these experiences. So when I told you about the gray whale migrating from Alaska down to California, just sharing with people like, yeah, like I was blown away. I had tears just like
Yeah.
stream down my
Yeah.
eyes that I wasn't expecting it. And
Yeah.
kind of just being able to share that with people on the tour, that's where I felt like I would just have more of these like juicy experiences. And then also just being open about what I want to do in life. And I remember I would talk to people on tours, like Scripps Institute of Oceanography, which is world renowned. Their oceanography school was right there. And I was thinking that there was going to be some sort of correlation to working for Scripps or doing something for them, but it just never went that way. But I thought it was. But I ended up like finding the job that led me to the path of what I'm doing now and excelling at. And that was a job on LinkedIn. So I think just through interviewing with this small company at the time that gave me a chance and being able to speak to the passion of what it was like to take people on these ocean experiences. I think that bringing that passion to this job where I really didn't have that experience that they were looking for, like that's what they signed up for. It was like
Yeah.
the passion, the energy, somebody who's like really going to come to this job and give a damn.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you didn't have like I don't even think at the time when you even went, like, did you have a sales background or
No,
experience in it? But like, we're all selling ourselves at some point in a job interview,
totally.
and so much, like it's so different saying, well, like, this is what I love about what I get to do every day, or this is
Yeah.
what I like remember, I think is a great word you just used. Like what I remember most about
Hmm.
what when I first fell in love with X, or what I
Yeah.
remember most about what really got me interested in Y was this time when. And
Hmm.
you can kind of bring those up and people are like, oh yeah, like you just said, like this person, like she gives a damn. Like we can teach her sales, but
Yeah.
nobody gives a damn as much
Yeah.
as Sam with this. So like I'm gonna trust that she'll figure the rest out. And
Yeah.
if she gives a damn, she'll definitely show
Yeah.
our customers why they should give a damn.
It's so simple, but so relevant. Like
Yeah,
just giving a damn.
yeah, yeah. Not necessarily easy either, but like giving a damn. It comes out. It's
Hmm.
something that's felt. It's something that like
Yeah.
not just it's not like a say word. It's like a do word. You kind
Yeah.
of like actually kind of give people examples. So that was, I think, really interesting. Tell me like about your I don't know, people in your life, like your
Hmm.
parents, friends. Like did you kind of see early on people that gave a
Yeah.
damn, or kind of like show that showed this curiosity and empathy around you? And if so,
Mm.
like who are the some of the people that you can kind of point to where you think you probably learned the most from who you
Yeah.
are today?
As you were saying that question, like my grandma popped into my head. Seeing her as a kid, she was the type of woman that she'd walk into her favorite Italian restaurant and the owner would come up and, give her a kiss on both cheeks and say, Thelma, welcome. Like, and it was just like this love that, and like this just like warmth that she would bring. And she was just like new people. Like, even if, like, I remember an experience, we were at Best Buy together and just like the friendliness and warmth that she brought to the woman that was checking us out. I think there was just something about that, and seeing how warm she was to just everybody that she would meet and everybody knowing her name, that was really impactful to me. And then that trickled down to my mom as well. So I would also see my mom have these like really beautiful relationships with people. And it's so cool. So I mentioned earlier that I've got 3 young kids. And one of the things that I remember so like succinctly is as a kid, did I use that word right? I like hope I didn't butcher it.
No,
Okay,
no.
it was good.
Kit.
All right. I remember as a kid watching my mom do dishes. Like if we were invited to a person's home and, like we were a guest in their house, she would do the dishes with the host and help the cleanup process. When you're hosting, there's like
Yeah. Wow.
boatloads of dishes, and she would help the host just clean up and like do the dishes. And they'd always be like, no, 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 like you don't need to. I got it. She'd be like, nope, like I'm coming in, I'm helping, and just sort of like I'm reading this book called Unreasonable Hospitality right now, and it's
Yes, yes.
amazing. Have you read that?
I've heard of it.
Oh,
I've heard of it.
so good.
And I need it.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
It's almost like that.
yeah,
And I remember when she was doing those acts, like of just washing the dishes with the host, I saw this like electric bond that would take place between her and the host from just having this experience where they're helping one another together.
yeah,
And now, as an adult, I've been doing that where if one of our kids' friends' parents has us over, and we're cooking meals for the kids, like I always step in and I do the dishes, and it's like it's kind of shocking to me, like the endorphins and the electricity that comes out by just like doing these sort of like small acts of like just being a good guest in somebody's
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
And I've even told my mom, I was like, seeing you help do the dishes for like hosts that had us in our home, like really made an impact on me. And yeah, it's like it's more rewarding than kind of just like sitting back and hanging out and talking to whoever it is that's also a
Yeah.
guest. But like actually like being in the kitchen and doing the work with the host has just been like a really kind of rewarding experience for me. And it's like so small, but there's like so much goodness that comes from that.
Yeah, you know what? I love that you offer that story because, like you said, it's kind of you're doing this. You're doing it with the person.
Yeah.
Like I know you talk about selling with and kind of
Hmm.
like doing that with your buyer, and
Yeah.
it's not like you're doing it to like feel guilty or feel like you have to. It's
Hmm.
like, no, like I want to give back.
Yeah.
And like, you're,
Yeah.
there's, that's a skill. Like, I think we can all think of that just being like a really good guest. Like, what would, like, an average guest would just come, say thank you, like, I
Hmm.
appreciate it, great
Yeah.
meal, like, oh man,
Yeah.
you made a great meal, it was so good.
Yeah.
But like how could we all be like above average guests in our lives, or like
Totally.
excellent or exceptional guests? Like, we could do the dishes, we could,
Yep.
like, help with the cleanup, help with like organizing stuff, or like, like bring something, or I don't know,
Yeah.
like, just do that where it's like taking as much off their plate as
Yes.
as humanly possible, right?
Yep.
And
Exactly.
goes a long way. I think I love that, like those warm interactions, like
Yeah.
those can take you so many places, because then people go, oh yeah, like Thelma probably got hooked up at the Italian restaurant. She got,
Yeah.
Thelma got tables, like she probably got discounts, like
Yeah.
better, quicker
Right?
service,
Yeah.
like she sold herself.
Yeah,
Um, I,
totally.
I don't know. And fun fact, Sam and I found out. I don't know if this was like a restaurant in our hometown. We
Yeah.
grew up in the same hometown.
It was
You can't. It's an uncanny story. We mentioned it in the
unreal.
beginning. How literally putting yourself out there, in
Yeah.
an authentic way. Sam did on a podcast, a few months ago. Sam said this year has been, I think you used the word like life changing, which is like, that you don't
Mhm.
always use that word. I remember I used that word 4 or 5 years ago when my dad, actually
Yeah.
passed away, and I had to go through that. But then also, COVID, and then getting a new
Yeah.
job, and just all the life changes. But then
Yeah.
you going from being just a guest on one podcast because you did, used a
Yeah.
product really well in your sales product, to being invited again, to, or no, being heard by someone in our
Mhm.
community, being,
Yeah.
connected, being invited to go on that, being invited to go on stage, and now here we are. And then we talk at a conference, about where are you from, which is a great question, by the way. If you do anything in 2025, ask someone, where are you from
Yeah.
originally, is what I like
Originally.
to add. Where are you from originally? Because people don't
Yeah.
know what to. Oh, I live in
Mhm.
Florida. I live in San Diego. Oh, you live in
Yeah.
San Diego, and all I just said was, Sam, where are you from originally? Oh, the
Yeah.
East Coast.
Uh-huh.
Cool. And I just wanted to see where this was going. I had no clue it
Yeah.
was going to go. Where on the East Coast? Maryland. Where in Maryland? Montgomery County. I mean, of all of the counties, Sam could have said, there are probably over 50
Unreal.
counties in the state of Maryland. What
I know.
county? Montgomery County, the same where I
Yeah.
grew up, outside of DC. Okay.
Yeah.
Randomly, what high school did you go to? And that's when I freaked out. And she said, Richard
Oh my
Montgomery, and then I
gosh.
just left the table.
I
She
know.
went to my same high school, gang. Out
Yeah.
of the 70 people at a conference,
I
someone who
know.
lives in San Diego, not only lives in my same town, but went to my
Yep.
high school and actually knows people that I'd went to school with, or her sister, somebody actually I went to
Yeah.
school with. Insane,
Unreal.
Sam. What a
I'll
a story.
I'll never forget. your reaction when we went to RM and you were just like, no, no
Threw my
way.
cup down. Like, get
All
out of
that,
town.
like, that image is like imprinted in life. It's kind of one of those where it's like it'll randomly shoot in your head and you
Yeah,
just like,
yeah,
you laugh to yourself, you
yeah.
know?
It
It's
doesn't happen
incredible.
every day. It's
No,
amazing.
no,
Um,
it is.
so, Sam, just kind of pivoting all this stuff that you've learned, all this stuff that you learned in your personal life through your grandmother, your mom, and, people in guiding kayaks, like,
Yeah.
what are ways that this, like, connecting, human connection shows up in what you do every day? Now you're in software
Hmm.
sales and you're, kind of living some of this contribution kind of that you want to do and your purpose.
Yeah.
Like, we talked a little bit about like how you start off calls, and that's a great
Hmm.
way, but
Stomach
what are so,
bugs.
so but you know like yeah, I guess what are ways you think that you kind of like kind of throughout your process and what you do every day really kind of transfer this belief that, what, I'm talking to a real person? Because I think
Yeah,
that's what, like, just me
totally.
looking at you from afar is like what your strengths are is like,
Yeah.
what, I can lower my guard down. I'm a little more vulnerable around Sam because of
Yeah.
how she is through me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a great example for you.
Nice.
And this just
Lay it on
happened
us.
like 2 days ago.
Love it.
So it's fresh.
Fresh out of the, oven.
Yeah,
I love
it's
it.
top of mind. And I'll caveat that I didn't even get a response to this, which is totally fine. So there was a company called Discount Tire, which I'm sure people have heard of. It's at least big in the West Coast, and that's who we use. Like, that's the company that we purchased our tires from. And as a part of that service, if you ever have a flat tire or if anything goes on, like, you can just roll up to one of the Discount Tire locations and they'll help you out and they'll service you. And so it was one Sunday morning, and we had stopped at the gas station to get gas, and my wife Rachel noticed that the tires were low, and we tried to fill them up with air, but they weren't filling. And she was just like, we had the Suburban full of 3 kids in the back, like, they they get really antsy in car rides, so it's just like, like, oh man, like, now we have to deal with this, kind of frustrated. But Rachel's like, let's just go to Discount Tire and have them take a look. So we roll up the Suburban to Discount Tire, and this guy, Jeremy, I remember his name because I was like so blown away by his customer service. He runs out of the Discount Tire store, like, literally, he's running. And he's wearing a suit, like a full
No
suit,
way.
and like nice shoes, everything. And he pops the hose into the tire, like, checks our PSI and just like fills it up. And he's like, we're seeing this a lot. It's the cold weather. Lots of people have been rolling up. And like, we were in and out within 5 minutes. And kids were happy. We went off to grandma's. It was great. And I was just like, I remember looking over at Rachel and I was like, I am so blown away by that customer service. Like, I can't believe that just happened. It was like at a NASCAR race. If you have a flat tire, like, that's how quick it
Like an
was.
emergency. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Like we were coming in with a flat tire or something.
Yes. And so I'm working at a new company now. And so then when I had this deal passed to me with Discount Tire, and I'm having this email exchange,
Oh, wow.
I had told him about my short little interaction from that
Yeah.
experience. I've been like,
Love it.
hey, like, this just like Jeremy from the San Diego location, Sunday morning, tires were flat, Suburban full of kids. And I just like
Love it.
pocketed that in there. And it wasn't a way to just, I could close a deal if I'm going to just add this
Yeah.
little piece.
Yeah.
It was more so just to like break the mold of like how people typically email on a day-to-day basis,
Yeah.
and like what would trigger just like a nice smile for myself if I were to receive that message back. Like, it's kind of more like that. It's just like this, just like spreading of like warmth and goodness to like
Love
break
it.
away from just like the mundane mold that work can sometimes be. And it was also just an opportunity to relive how great the customer service was. So just like
Yeah.
little things like that, I always try to incorporate.
Yeah. I think like when you can tell, First of all, compliments go a long way, but like just
Yeah.
like people spend a lot of money on their brand and
Yeah.
marketing and customer service. So like even like if you're not in a sales role, if you go up to a Starbucks and just you have a good experience, like
Yeah.
the goodwill and again, not for it to have to come back to you, but
Yeah.
it definitely could, but for you to just write a quick letter, a
Yeah.
handwritten letter to someone's manager
Yeah.
about an experience, or
Yep.
of course leave a great review or screenshot a review and email it into somebody, like
Totally.
that goes such a long way. And
It does.
I've heard of people getting free meals, free
Hmm.
food, free
Yeah.
like gifts. I mean,
Yep.
just because you took the time. Again, most people, 90% of people are just going to have that experience, and they're not doing it. They're not looking. Jeremy's not rushing out for, Sam to write an email. He's just conditioned that way. Like,
Yeah.
just like, ding, oh, all right, it's on. Let's go. I'm sprinting.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like for you to kind of break the mold and go out, like that's such, and so yeah, if anybody, is listening, had, just take a minute, take 10 last experiences where it just was above and beyond, and write a handwritten letter, write a review
Yeah.
on Yelp, screenshot that, send it into the manager. Again, not because, hey, if I do this maybe I'll get something free. No, just
Yeah.
because it's like the right thing to do. And
Yeah.
it makes you stand out. And
Yeah.
hopefully, again, going back to maybe you're Thelma and they're remembering your name next time, and you're getting excellent service every time you go in, right?
Yeah.
Which is really cool.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Totally.
As we kind of end off, like, Sam, any kind of like, kind of, I always like to ask like advice, like for
Hmm.
people that are maybe they don't feel like they're in sales. They're doing a role where the job title is not salesperson. They don't have a
Yeah.
quota. Maybe it's graphic designer. Maybe it's
Hmm.
paralegal. Maybe it's anything other than like a quota bearing role. What would you tell to them on ways that they may be able to, you know, connect with people,
Hmm.
and maybe start getting them to like lean into them more, on a human level? What's some like basic advice maybe you would, tell those people about, kind of selling in a human level?
Yeah. And I think it's just, there's definitely, we all as sellers know that there is a negative connotation around sales. It's like, hey, like, what can I get out of this to make money? And there's just like, there's a whole lot of sellers that just are not like that. They're just genuinely in it for the connection piece. And I recently watched Diary of a CEO. There's a like long form interviews that he does, and he had this woman on called Vanessa Van Edwards, and like her whole story that she talks about is that she's a recovering awkward person, and that she really got obsessed with finding ways to connect with people, and that's through how you show up in conversation. It's through your body language, things like that. And like much of the audience that she's talking to reminds me, Alex, of what you were just saying, of like people maybe in a role where there's not that element of like you're carrying a quota or there's sales behind it, but just more so like the reward that you get from having connection. And she even brought up something that I thought was really interesting. She talked about how some people sort of have this attitude of just like, I don't like people. But I think she's like, I think people say that because they haven't given themselves a chance to like be open to the human experience and how lovely it can be, or they're just not showing up in the right way, like they haven't been taught. And so I think if you can just sort of learn the basics of how to be conversational, what that looks like, the give get behind it, putting yourself, being present in it, not being worried about like what am I going to say next, but just like actually just being involved in the conversation, like that. And this is something that's been a journey of like learning for me, but like when I am in a conversation with somebody and it's like we're real and it's we're talking, like there's so much goodness that comes from it. It's probably like a primal survival, like innate need within us, as like how we've evolved as humans, is the community, is the connection piece. And it's so rewarding. And
Mm-hmm.
like you asked me earlier about like who really shaped my life and brought me, into sales. My dad on the flip side was like a major introvert, and he didn't have a lot of friends. He didn't really have community. He kind of just like quite frankly was like a little bit of a hermit. And so I saw like these two like completely different ways that my adult parents had lived. You had my mom, who was this very vibrant conversationalist, friends, rich community. And then I saw my dad, who was like obsessed with his job, at his computer all the time, kind of just like workaholic. Some nights I didn't even see him because he would just work all day. And my dad, he passed away of a heart attack at 65, which was pretty young. And when I look back and I reflect on that, it feels like there was so much of life that he was missing by just being such an extreme introvert and not branching out and doing things with friends or just putting himself out there to connect with people. And so it is like really interesting to see the polarity between like how my mom lived, how my dad lived, and like the trajectory of their life and where that went.
Wow.
So it's I guess been a good learning experience for me to be able to see that, and like through his passing, it's almost like a gift that I get to take away from that was like seeing how your life can really alter without having those connecting experiences. And it's just taught me I want to work. Like I love my job. Like if I could, I probably would work like way too much, but I did definitely take a lesson from my dad on the importance of prioritizing like your own well-being, friendships, community, playing pickleball, like whatever, and not just like obsessing over making my job my life.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, thanks for sharing that. It's an important, like, it's a good contrast. Like both
Yeah.
of those sides of them make you, and our parents teach us so much. And I'm just a big believer that like even your dad, like anybody that was considers them quote unquote an introvert that doesn't get energy through like connecting with people, they
Yeah.
still do. They still do have connections. They
Yeah.
may not have as many. Like just because you don't get a lot of energy out of connecting doesn't mean you don't have connections, whether they're your
Yeah.
immediate family, your kids, your
Exactly.
people you grew up with, people at your church. Like they just may not be strong connections, but little things that you can kind of do through what Sam's talking about, maybe. And obviously his like he's very much I would think connected to his wife and your mom and the family and stuff like that. So yeah, just these things kind of remind us that
Hmm.
okay, there are things in life that hold more importance. Maybe we can't see them as much, they're not as tangible as money or titles and our job and our work, but they're still very much important. So I think it's a good reminder, Sam, kind of what you just said. So thank you for saying it.
Yeah.
Sam, I could talk to you forever, I swear. But we're kind of coming up. I want to end on a fun note, and I think you'll give us a good answer to this.
All right.
Everybody has a different answer to this question, and it makes us who we are. And I'm truly a believer that we all sell in our unique way. We are uniquely us, and we don't really fully kind of understand that, and we don't fully always get to know how unique people are. So this is a question about you, so
Okay.
hopefully you can take it anywhere you want. Sam, if I asked your wife, the people closest to you, what is just something that is so totally Sam? Maybe it is something that only would happen to you. Maybe it is something that only you would do. Something that is so totally you. What would they tell me?
So remember how you and I were talking and we found out that we went to the same high school
Yeah.
together?
No.
Like, that's it.
I love it. This is the first answer that comes back to an experience that I had, and
Yeah.
somewhat share the story. But go ahead, continue, Sam. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's just those weird coincidences in
Yeah,
life that you're
yeah,
like, how did this even happen? Like,
yeah,
wait, what?
yeah, yeah,
Like, kind of those weird coincidences like that happens quite frequently. And I love it. It's like, it's the best.
yeah.
It's the best.
Well, so that I won't let that be the last thing, but I called Sam afterwards, and there's a lot of coincidences. I feel like I want to go
Mhm.
deeper into this thought of, you know, um, I don't know if they're coincidences or, serendipity, as some
Yeah.
people call it, where it's
Yep.
like, hey, this thing happened. I can't explain it. It's just like
Yeah.
it's unbelievable, right? The
Yeah.
fact that we would to meet, but then I also feel like they're not completely by chance, because, like, dude, the more you put
Hmm.
yourself in those situations, the more
Totally.
you're saying yes to things in life and
Yeah.
investing in yourself, you will connect it with inevitably people that are doing the same,
Yep.
and and or even just more people, and you never know who you're going to be sitting next to in an airplane,
Yeah.
in an Uber, anywhere. I mean, they could be, your next, wife or husband. They could be, somebody
Yep.
that offer you a job. They could be just, hey, somebody that, really made you, think of something, give you a nice book, give you a quote. And those things happen to people that kind of put themselves in those places. So
Yeah.
I was, made me think of that. There was this just, completely crazy story about the same thing, where I met a woman on a airplane and had a 2.5 hour conversation, about her and her son, and it was just a beautiful conversation that, I only would have been sat there because I got sat
Yeah.
on a different plane and I lost my wallet, and it was given back to me through the cockpit of the airplane, and through that, made me
Yeah.
have this conversation that I never would have had. But yeah, so
It's
it's out there for us,
yeah.
if we're willing to, accept it,
Totally. And
right?
it's quite like a lovely feeling.
Yeah.
Like
Oh
like
yeah.
I remember talking to you after you had that experience, and like you being able, and it sounded like it was really healing because there was a lot
Yeah.
of ties
Yes.
to that conversation back from, you talked about your dad passing
Hmm.
away,
Hmm.
and like that healing for both of you, her and
Yeah.
you, and like just the healing that brought.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
it's very life-giving to be able to
Yeah.
have those experiences.
Yeah. For sure. Well, Sam, thank you for joining and all the goodness. Where can people, continue to kind of learn what you're doing and stay connected with you,
Yeah.
after this?
Well, I did have a call with another Sales Success Society member, Kaylee Connors,
Yes.
who's
Yeah.
just an
Yeah.
amazing human who's also in software sales, but in the cyber security space. And she let me pick her brain on like LinkedIn. She's
Yeah.
so good at posting, and she posts a lot of personal stuff about her
Yeah.
kids and just
Yeah.
her life. And they're really good. So I had a nice like hour-long chat with her about how she
Nice.
strategizes around that, and really formulates these posts. So this is me like putting it out there to the universe that I really like. LinkedIn feels like an important place to focus like a good deal of attention,
Yeah.
and kind of putting stuff out there, not for it to
Yeah.
be like received or
Yeah.
go anywhere, but
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like for the potential connection it could bring.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
thanks to Kaylee for helping me. But yes, find
Awesome.
me LinkedIn. That's where I'm going to try to
Awesome.
really put more of my stuff out there.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
We'll have all your stuff in the notes. And Sam, thank you for putting yourself out there, on a podcast, and eventually finding your way to me. I hope to know you for a long time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, likewise, Alex. This has been really great.